Hey, Richard Bryce here, tennis hacker. In this video, I'm going to help you to attack short forehands. It's such an important shot to develop as you try and move up through the levels because it allows you to put a lot of pressure on your opponents. Once your opponent knows that if they hit a short ball that you're going to put it away or at least put them in a lot of trouble, it causes them to want to go for more shots and it can lead to them making a lot of errors. So what we're going to be looking at in this video is some of the key technical components. We're going to be talking about the footwork that you need to use for different types of short balls. And I'm also going to be talking a little bit about one of the most important aspects, which is how to read the ball more quickly, because if you don't read the short forehand early enough, it's hard to set up in the right position and execute the shot effectively. So I'm going to be talking about some training strategies that you can use to improve your ability to read where the ball's going. So I hope you find the video helpful. If you do, give me that thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, it's much appreciated if you could do that as well. Okay, so let's start by talking about the footwork, because setting up in the right position for these short forehands is essential if you want to execute them well. So you need to read where the ball is going quickly, and then you need to set up in the right position, and you need to use the appropriate footwork pattern. Because when the ball is a little bit lower, we're generally going to be hitting from a neutral stance. So neutral stance, you'll be stepping forwards into the ball, and then your back leg is going to be pivoting around. And then when the ball is higher, you're generally going to be using some variation of an open or semi-open stance so that you can drive up into the ball. And this time your back outside leg is going to kick back initially as a counterbalance. So the exact stance that you use is going to be really important. What's also important is how far you are away from the ball. So when you're hitting a lower ball, you can afford to be a little bit closer. When you're hitting a higher ball, you need to set up much further away. So on this higher ball, I've got a greater distance between my body and the ball compared to the lower ball. And actually this lower ball has kicked up a little bit. If the ball was even lower, potentially I'd only be that far away from it. So it really depends on the exact ball that you're dealing with. But for the lower balls, closer and neutral stance with a single leg pivot where your back leg is going to come around afterwards. From the higher ball, we're going to be using that open stance or semi-open stance, and we're going to be further away from the ball. So these are things that you need to practice and need to work on. And if you would like help with that side of things, I've created a free footwork program to help you. So I'll place a link to the free footwork program up in the top corner, and I'll also place it down in the description. Now, when it comes to the footwork and the technique, I would say that the key piece, in addition to setting up in the right position, is the loading. When you're trying to hit a short forehand, you're generally trying to get a little bit of pace on it, so you've got to make sure that you prepare properly. So the final steps that you make before you hit your shot, so as soon as I recognize the ball, I'm starting to get side on, I'm stepping across myself, and here I'm really loading in these final steps. So I'm loading into my left leg. Now, I'm naturally a right-handed player, but I'm relearning to play left-handed because I injured my collarbone, and unfortunately I can't play right-handed anymore. So this is one of my practice sessions, and this is the sort of stuff that I'm focusing on at the moment. And what I'm focusing on here is really loading this left leg. So as I move in towards that shot, I'm making sure that I'm loaded onto my left leg. My pelvis, my torso are both pointing to the side. My pelvis is rotated a little bit further back, and this is what then allows you to drive through that back leg to initiate the mechanics. But that final step here, I'm loading into that left leg as I do my unit turn, so now I can throw this leg forwards, throw this hip forwards. Oh, there's a terrible arrow. Throw this hip forwards to initiate the racket. To initiate the torso rotation and then initiate the racket drop. And it's very similar on the open stance. I've still loaded this leg. So as I've loaded this leg, my torso has rotated. So now I'm going to be driving the hip forwards. As the hip drives forwards, it's then going to create the racket lag. So you're going into the loaded position. Now I'm throwing the hip forwards, As that happens, the torso fires a moment or two after. That's going to pull you into the racket lag position here, and then from there it's an acceleration through to contact. Okay, so loading, driving through the back leg, back hip to initiate the swing, create the racket lag, and hit the ball. So you have to make sure that you've loaded properly. Unless you get that final loading, so you can see it looks a little bit different each time. On when I've set up for the neutral stance, my left leg has stepped forwards in front of my right leg as my torso is rotated, and then that's then allowing me to drive off my left leg. So the footwork patterns that you use, the way that you think about setting up for the shot and making sure that you get that finalized unit turn, so that as you plant, for you if you're a right-handed player, plant your right leg down and drive through your right leg, you're fully rotated, you're fully prepared, so that then you can start the forwards motion. Now I want to take a look from a different angle, and we're going to be focusing on a different thing. So the first bit that's tricky is setting up in the right position and making sure that you're loaded, but then after that the timing is really the important piece of the puzzle. And when I think about timing, I think about it from two perspectives. We've got the start of the swing, so when you start the swing relative to the bounce of the ball, and that's going to be based on the kind of the visual side of things, reading the speed, the spin, the flight, and the distance of the ball. But I'll be talking more about that in the moment. So when do you actually drive through that back hip? So here you can see the ball is bouncing, and now I'm thinking about throwing that hip forwards to initiate the swing. So that's part of the timing when you actually start your swing. But then the other part to the timing, and maybe the harder part, is the sequencing of the body. So you have to drive through your hip, followed by your torso, and we're talking fractions of a second later. As you do that, it then creates the racket lag, and what should ideally be happening is we should be stretching the muscles in the chest and the shoulder out. And here my sequencing, my timing is a little bit off. My chest fired a little bit too soon. I would rather have more lag in my arm. So if I allow my chest and shoulder to stretch a little bit more, I can then store elastic in them, which is then going to allow me to create more racket head speed through to contact. So my timing is a little bit off, which either means that I'm starting the swing a little bit too late. So maybe instead of driving as the ball, just after the ball bounces, maybe I need to drive a little bit sooner, which would mean being set up in position quicker on this shot. Or I need to adjust my swing and my sequencing a little bit so that I can get more of a stretch in my chest, so get that done a little bit earlier, so then my chest fires a little bit earlier and I can use more of those muscles to help me create additional racket head speed. So I'm hitting, reasonable shots at the moment. Obviously I'm relearning to play with my left hand. This is a process that I'm going through, trying to develop things. So the whole time that I'm practicing and playing, I'm thinking about these aspects. I'm making sure that I'm loaded, and I'm trying to get the sequencing. Sometimes I do a really good job. I get the sequencing right. It's much more relaxed and I get a lot more racket head speed and a lot more power. And then other shots, I don't do it as well. So obviously as I move forwards, this is the stuff that I'm working on trying to get. Just get the timing between hip, torso, creating more stretch in the chest. So that one was a little bit better than some of the other ones that I've looked at. Actually, no, I lied. That one, contact seemed a little bit late. So, but this is the stuff that you kind of go through, and this is why it's so important to record yourself, because you can see what's actually happening. So yes, when I'm on court, I feel like I'm doing a decent job. I'm hitting a good quality of shot, but then when you watch it back on video, there's definitely room for improvement. Now let's quickly look at some of the higher balls and talk about the same thing. And the same parts apply. The first thing that's going to be important is, obviously we've got to load, we've got to be in the right position, but when do I drive through that back hip? So relative to the bounce of the ball, when do I drive through the hip? And what I was finding for all of these is I wasn't quite getting forwards soon enough, so I was driving through the back hip a little bit late. And obviously if you drive through the back hip late, then everything's going to be a little bit late, and that's really what I was finding. So ideally I'd be driving through my back hip just a little bit sooner than that, but I'm doing the best I can, driving through, and now it's still the same sequencing. We're still trying to throw the right, or for me as a left-hander, trying to throw the left hip forwards, followed by the torso. As that happens, it's going to create this racket lag position. So I've got a reasonable racket lag there. I've got actually a decent stretch in the chest. But because I initiated the swing a little bit late, I end up taking that ball a little bit further back than I would ideally like to. So out of the two, I definitely find the lower ball easier. I'm able to get much more power and I'm able to hit the shot more consistently. On the higher ball, I'm still not timing it as well as I want to. Again, it's a reasonable shot. I can hit it with a decent level of consistency. It's just lacking the power at the moment, and that comes down to the timing. So as I move forwards, I just have to get better. Now, the longer I practice for, the more I'll work on different types of shot, get used to thinking about driving through that hip, get used to playing around with the sequencing, hopefully get that contact a little bit earlier, and that's going to make a big difference in terms of the amount of power that I can get. But the process is very similar. The biomechanics are very similar. What changes is you have to set up in a different position, and then to allow yourself to drive through your hips and your pelvis, it just creates a different footwork pattern. But the upper body mechanics are relatively similar, obviously slightly different, but relatively similar. But this is kind of how I think about the technique and what I'm working on at the moment. So depending where you are within your development, these are some of the elements that you can start to play around with. And again, really important to record yourself. We've talked about the footwork, we've talked about the technique. Now we need to talk about something that I've mentioned a couple of times, which is the importance of visual recognition, of quickly reading where the ball is going so that you can move forwards and set up in the right position. Because if you don't recognize the ball early enough, you don't get set up early enough, you are not going to be able to execute these shots on a high level on a consistent basis. And this is where things get a little bit tricky. Obviously, part of the solution is focusing on it, trying to become more aware and trying to react faster. But in order to do that, your visual system has to be capable of doing it. And the brutal reality is that most lower level players, and I mean below the 5.0 level, so 3.0, 3.5, 4.0, 4.5, or depending what country you're in, most intermediate levels, players' visual systems don't work well enough to allow them to react quickly and to set up in the right position. And this is why when you watch players play, that's kind of the number one issue that players face. It's not because they don't understand the importance of preparing early and setting up in the right position. It's because there's a physical limitation, a visual capacity that isn't functioning at a high enough level to enable them to do it. It's something that I dealt with a lot myself. When I was younger, there was a lot of things that I struggled with on court, and it turns out that there was very specific visual issues that I was struggling with. And for me, I would get too close to the ball and I would hit the ball late because my visual system couldn't judge speed and distance on an accurate enough level. Fortunately, I was able to correct those problems using simple exercises like I'm demonstrating here. So the exercises are designed to improve things like your eye movements, to train your brain to process the image from both eyes together so that you can judge distance and judge depth more effectively. And by training my vision in that way, I was able to develop a really high level forehand with my right hand. Unfortunately, can't play right-handed anymore. But now that I've transitioned over to playing left-handed, one of the reasons that I've been able to develop my left hand relatively quickly to this point is because my visual system is already capable of doing what it needs to do. So now it's just a case of getting practice, working on repetitions, doing it over and over again, and my technique evolves and improves because I can already read where the ball's going effectively. So it's very highly likely that in addition to on-court work, for you to develop the sort of short attacking forehand that you've got in your mind that you want to do, where you can see the ball, you step in and you can just hit it for winners, it is very likely you might need to do work on your visual system, firstly so that you can read where the ball is going, secondly so you can react quickly, secondly so you can read where the ball's going and set up in better positions, and so that you can initiate your swing at the right time and adjust the speed of your swing relative to the ball that you're dealing with. So if you would like help with that, I've got a free class that's going to teach you all about it. I'll place a link up there and I'll place a link down there. So in this class, I'm going to teach you about using brain-based training. So a lot of it's about vision training, but it also talks about improving coordination, which is important for technique. It's also going to tell you a little bit about my program and how I work with players, because I've got a full program called the Neuro Tennis System where I teach players brain-based training techniques in order to help them become more skillful. And then when you're more skillful, you can use a higher level technique and it allows you to improve and play at a level that you otherwise wouldn't be possible, you know, if you were just using regular practice and coaching alone. So if you're interested in learning more about that side of things, check out this the free class. And again, just a quick reminder about the free footwork program. The links will be in the same place, so you can get both of them together if you would like to. Okay, if you've got any questions about what I've talked about today, I would love you to leave them down below. Any comments or thoughts, leave them in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, give me one of those thumbs up. And again, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, it really helps me out if you could subscribe as well. Okay, I'll catch you next time.